Welcome to Avoncliff Wood. I'm here today filming with Festival of Nature, and I'm going to be joined by Joe Middleton from the Woodland Trust, who's the site manager here, to find out a little bit more about how this ancient woodland and this new tree plantation is going to make this part of the Avon Valley even better for nature. Joe, talk to me about this Woodland Trust site. We've got ancient woodland over here, we've got new trees being planted over here. How did you guys come to have this site and what are you doing to it?
Hey Emma, so the Woodland Trust bought the site only about 3 years ago. In 2018, we launched a huge funding appeal to try and buy basically 50 acres of ancient woodland that was in private ownership that came up for sale. So we wanted to protect that for the future. And the Woodland Trust kind of does three things: protect woodland, restore woodland, and create more woodland. And we wanted to create a new woodland to help buffer that one and allow the woodland to sort of come from the ancient into the new.
So this is what we're doing here then, isn't it? So talk to me a little bit about what we've got going on. How many different trees have you planted? What have you planted? And why is it great for this area?
Yeah, this is our woodland creation project that I decided that I didn't want to use any plastic. I didn't want to buy any plastic. So I wanted to use some innovative ideas to create woodland. Have to protect them from deer. There's high deer numbers in this part of the world, rabbits, voles, also everything wants to eat your saplings. So we have got a trial site for biodegradable tree guards. So the site is essentially 25 acres and roughly big areas of open space. Lots of wide rides to keep the views open. We've got some natural regeneration corridors as well around the edge of the woodland. These are 5,000 trees in loads of different biodegradable tree guard options, and they only really came available around about 2019. So we've got ones made of paper, cardboard, polylactic acid, plant starch, cashew nut shell, resin, wool, got the whole shebang. Anything that is on offer to help us with this big climate crisis, both the carbon and also the ecological crisis, to allow the wildlife to spread into these areas. This will be a woodland in 20 years' time. So in the meantime, we're just protecting that and allowing them to get up to a height where they're safe from browsing using all these innovative methods.
How many years will it take for these trees to be big enough that you can remove the different tree guards, assess how successful they've been, and they'll be safe from deer and other browsers?
It depends on the site, it depends on the soils, depends on the weather, the climate. 5 to 7 is best guess, and that's when the earlier you can take them off, the better. Some are going in the storms, in February and May recently when it just didn't stop raining. Some of them disintegrated already. This is a trial site. Some are brilliant and some are still standing firm, proud, strong after 2 years now. All they've got to do is probably last another 3, maybe 4 or 5, and then hopefully take them off, allow the tree to grow, and then in 20 years' time, it's a woodland.
So at the end of this project, I guess you can kind of use it as a bit of a trial site here to find out which of these guards could be something that we use across the UK, across the world, kind of moving forward in all of our big tree planting strategies.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the agenda everywhere. Every government is pledging to plant more trees. We need to be careful we plant the right tree in the right place. We don't always have to plant. You can allow natural regeneration to come in, but certain places you do have to plant. And this trial site is one of about 4 I know of in the UK. There's some up in Scotland, some in Yorkshire, and everyone's trialling to see what we can use to help woodland grow without any sort of negative impact of all the plastic that gets used. So this is one of the UK's leading trial sites. The most amount of tree guards, we've got 14 different types of alternate tree guards here. If it comes on the market, I am literally on the phone, emailing left, right and centre, trying to get them here. I've got a house, a back room and a garage stocked to full of them. So I have to come out and replace them after storms, and we are just trialling. It's not the most scientific experiment because there's so many variables about how that tree will and won't grow the drought. It's purely about whether that tree guard will make it to 5 or 7 years. So hopefully in a few years' time, people can find out exactly what works and what doesn't.
Joe, you said like right tree, right place, right time. So what is it that you've planted here at Avoncliff?
So we've tried to replicate exactly what's in the ancient woodland. So that ancient woodland is predominantly oak standards with old ash coppice, and underneath that the understory is hazel, lots of elm actually still going, and hawthorn. So we've planted exactly the same thing, predominantly oak. We can't plant ash because of ash dieback, but we've also got loads of interesting shrubs. So resilience is the big word in woodlands at the moment. As climate changes, things are moving. So the more species diversity of things that have been in that area over the last 1,000 years, the better. So we've got beech, oak, birch, cherry as our kind of canopy trees, small leaf lime, and then as understory, we've got loads of shrubs. Shrubs are fantastic for birds and for habitat for wildlife, dormice. So we've also got everything from Guelder rose to wayfaring tree to elder buckthorn, food plant for brimstone butterflies, bit of everything. So we've got as many of the native broadleaf trees that we can get in, really.
And how many do you think of these trees from the ancient woodland might start to migrate and move into this area? You said you've got this kind of buffer zone.
Yeah, so that's the idea with these natural regeneration corridors. So this fence is just to keep people out, keep dogs out, just let the woodland come out. We also in the woodland have ash dieback. So there's a large amount of that ash which is actually starting to die. Well, we won't know the final percentage, but we're just allowing it to do it without it having to worry about health and safety. So we've created these buffer zones to allow the woodland to fall. You can already see the bramble already coming out. The birch, hawthorn, those kind of pioneer species will naturally come up, be protected by the bramble and come out. And hopefully, you know, if a big ash or a big oak falls down, it can stay exactly where it is and provide an amazing habitat for deadwood species, millipedes, fungi, and that kind of stuff, which, you know, you might have to shift otherwise if it lands on a path. So yeah, these are our natural regeneration corridors.
You mentioned ash dieback. Now, ash dieback is caused by a fungus, isn't it? How big a problem is ash dieback in the UK and I guess also here in your ancient woodland?
Ash dieback, I manage 30 woods. Ash dieback's in every single one. And it's the predominant ash tree in a lot of parts of the Mendips and the Cotswolds. And ash dieback is likely to cause 80% of our ash trees in the UK to die. I mean, that's huge, man. That's like catastrophic. Yeah. But there are tolerant species that will live and they'll be able to cope with the fungi decay and they'll be able to come back. But you need to be able to leave those trees to find out which are one of the 20% resilient trees.
So what about in this ancient woodland that we've got here?
So Avoncliff Wood is predominantly ash, ash coppice with oak standards. The ash hasn't been coppiced in over 100 years. And the ash dieback is in the crown of so many of those trees and they are failing, they are dying. But in a woodland with no paths, no people, there's no access to this woodland. We are literally closing it, leaving it to do its natural thing and then monitoring it over time. So we've got a unique experiment in Avoncliff Wood, which is what we're calling our living laboratory. And that is 10 metre square transects, quadrats, where we survey every single plant, insect, snail, invertebrate mammal to see how it changes over time. So in each of those little 10 spots, we have ecologists going in, surveying it every 2 years. And then as the ash dieback changes the canopy and the species, we'll see whether or not those species thrive or whether they completely decline. Do you want to go and see inside the wood?
Absolutely.
Let's go.
I mean, so how do you actually deal with ash dieback in a forest like this?
So in some woodlands you have to chop down the trees if they're leaning over roads. There's really dangerous health and safety implications, or on a property. On a path you have to make a decision, but in a woodland like this where there are no paths, we made this decision just to not let anyone in and protect it forevermore and allow that wildlife to do its thing. So the ash can naturally fall, can provide a home for all those amazing fungi, beetles, insects. And in this particular woodland, there's actually remnant populations of elm. So elm was basically wiped out by Dutch elm disease in the 1970s. Very similar thing to ash dieback happened, but there are remaining fragments of elm in woodlands that weren't chopped down, they weren't affected, and they weren't harvested. So I'll show you how to identify it.
Brilliant.
So elm essentially can grow in a hedgerow or in a woodland. And it has this kind of, see the spike on the end, sometimes almost like a trident.
Yeah.
So elm is asymmetrical at the base of the leaf. So where the leaf meets the stem and it hits the branch, can you see on each side, they're completely asymmetrical and they don't meet.
Oh yeah.
And every single elm leaf does exactly the same thing. All of them.
So
sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right. And the way to tell a wych elm from an English elm is the wych elm overlaps the edge of the stalk. And you have to get really magnifying glass out to check that one though. But if you can tell it apart from a hazel, which is usually coppiced, so an elm is a single stem all the way up. And it also zigzags. So if you look at the twig, you see it just zigzags its way all the way up and then comes out at right angles. So when it has no leaves on in the middle of winter, and you can look up in the silhouette of it against the sky, you can actually see that it's kind of really right angled and also zigzaggy as it goes up.
Ah, so you don't always need the leaves to be out to ID a tree.
No, that's one of the benefits of trees, is even in the middle of the winter you can still geek it out.
So we've got a nice ash here. How do I, if I was looking for it, how would I spot ash dieback?
So ash dieback is essentially, it dies back from the crown down, but we can't get up there. So when you get to the lower branches or on a young tree, you get something called epicormic growth, and usually it comes out because it's stressed. So that tree is stressed and it's sending out new leaves. But you can actually see the ash dieback right on the stems here. So can you see the whole of that main stem from the top down has died? It's just still surviving here. Same with this one. This main stem has completely died back, and what happens is the fungi blocks the water and nutrient transfer up and down, essentially just inside the bark. So it dies back from the top down, and then it's just still surviving. But if you imagine that in a whole tree, if it loses half of its crown, it's going to die. So it sends out extra growth down the bottom, and that's basically how you can see ash dieback. It bruises and unfortunately dies from the top down, and that is probably not likely to survive in a young tree. But there is a hope that in the big old trees, they may live with it and find a tolerance to it for a number of years.
Joe, we've got the most amazing lineup here. Talk me through all of your different types of tree guards, because this is the original, isn't it? This is the plastic. This is the thing that we're trying to find an alternative to.
Yeah, well, for 25 years this has been the market leader. It works, you can get it at any height. But the questions is how many times can you recycle it? What can you reuse it for? Ideally, you keep putting it on the trees. But we need to move away from this legacy of plastic. Everyone knows that. So there are alternatives, and as I was saying earlier, that we have these polylactic acids, cornstarch ones, such as these. We have some that they are keeping the ingredients very, very secret.
Okay.
But with quite a lot of these alternatives, they're made from cornstarch and polylactic acids, and then they sort of imitate plastic. But the question marks are still there at the moment over what happens over time as that degrades and gets into the soils and into water. And then we're going down to sort of more traditional paper, cardboard, more cardboard hedge guards again. These are, possibly also the polylactic acid. So you sort of have three arms. You've got these alternative bioplastics. You have paper and cardboard, especially such as this one, which is another high 1.2 paper fibre guard, similar to this one. Almost looks like egg boxes.
It does look like a glorified egg box. But hopefully they last a bit longer than an egg box.
Hopefully in an egg box. And they're going to get battered around on the hills and mountains of Scotland and Dartmoor, and also in lowland environments. They're going to have to sort of survive the rain, dogs, pressure, people, but they've just got to last 5 to 7 years. All they've got to do. So we've got the polylactic acids, we've got the cardboards, a couple more cardboards here, and then we've got some new designs which are weird and wonderful vegetable oil derivatives. And this one is actually made from wool and cashew nut shell resin and castor oil. So some complex science there. And essentially the wool is bound in. And hopefully with each of those three arms, and as more and more products come available, we can move away from plastic, and that we can start to use something that can be left in the environment, reuse as many times as possible before it goes back and becomes something new or just decays and is, completely non-toxic, non-problematic in the soil.
I think it's brilliant that you're able to do that with this site. And you look around and there are all sorts of different colours of tree guard, and it's brilliant that you can trial all of them, see how they actually fare when they're left alone.
Yeah, and that's the key, leaving a legacy is the one thing when you're planting trees that you want to leave a positive legacy of a woodland. You don't want any detrimental impacts. So, I helped design this wood, and it's one of the legacies I'll be leaving to my great-grandchildren somewhere, hopefully, that says, I planted and created a woodland. Every one of us, when we plant a tree, think about the future, and if we can do it with the minimal impact, the better.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for showing me around. I will definitely be coming back in 5, 10, 20 years to see how this flourishes. It's a wonderful site.
I'll see you then. Thanks.